Imagine that Bishop T.D. Jakes and Bishop Noel Jones, two of the most powerful and well-known preachers in the United States, were in a fight so bad that it almost split the whole church community in two. Talk of deception, jealousy, and competition between these two spiritual giants went on for years. But what really caused the split? More importantly, how did they finally get along again after years of fighting? We're going to reveal one of the most shocking behind-the-scenes stories in modern preaching today. I promise you, the truth will shock you. It is very important to know the names Bishop T.D. Jakes and Bishop Noel Jones in the current ministry world. Both men led millions of people to faith, changed the culture of the church, and had an impact on not only their congregations but also the whole Christian world. It was a secret fight between these two spiritual giants that went on for years. It wasn't just about pride, it wasn't just about having power, it wasn't just about fame either. Their argument got worse, and it split many church members, leaders, and gospel groups. What was it that made them so angry at each other? Was it because of different ways of leading, claims of betrayal, or even money issues related to the business side of ministry? The most important question is probably what happened that made them finally decide to solve their long-standing problems. This movie tells the untold story of how two of the most well-known preachers in the United States went from fighting to making peace. We'll find out shocking facts about how they broke up, the times that almost ended their relationship, and the unexpected turns that brought them back together. Do not leave until the very end. What you are about to hear is not just a rumor. It teaches you how to be a leader, be humble, and forgive. It might change the way you always think about RH leaders. Before we can understand they fight between Bishop T.D. Jakes and Bishop Noel Jones, we need to know more about these two men. Their paths to fame were anything but normal, and their victories set the stage for a rivalry that was unlike any other. T.D. Jakes was born in South Charleston, West Virginia, into a poor family. While he wasn't born famous or wealthy, he did have a clear vision, a strong will, and an undeniable need to teach. In the early 1980s, he started his ministry with just a few people, but his dynamic speaking style, his ability to connect the Bible to real-life problems, and his deeply emotional delivery made him stand out from almost every other pastor at the time. Jakes moved his ministry to Dallas, Texas in the mid-1990s. There, he started the Potter's House, a mega church that became a global brand with more than 30,000 members and millions of online and TV fans. He was more than just a pastor. He wrote books, made movies, and became famous in both religious and non-religious groups. At the same time, Noel Jones rose in a different way. Since he was born in Spanish Town, Jamaica, his family had always been spiritual. Noel took on the job of his father, who was a bishop. Jones was known for speaking with a lot of intellectual depth. He mixed theology with a sharp sense of humor and a strong stage presence. It didn't take him long to become one of the most respected Christian leaders on the West Coast after becoming pastor of the City of Refuge Church in Los Angeles, California. His church grew to have thousands of members, many of whom were famous people, sports, and people with a lot of power because they liked his charisma and wisdom. It was crazy how famous both guys were by the late 1990s and early 2000s, but this is where things get tricky. A lot of the time, influence turns into power in the ministry, and power can times lead to competition. When T.D. Jakes became the face of the megachurch movement of today and Noel Jones stayed as one of the most well-known speakers in gospel preaching, it was only natural to... His books were big hits, his movies were seen by a lot of people, and his sermons were carried into millions of homes around the world. Some people started calling him the Oprah of the pulpit, which meant they thought he had a lot of power outside of his church. This fame earned him respect around the world, but it also led to criticism. Some people said he was mixing church and business too much, which they said crossed the line between what was holy and what wasn't. At the same time, Noel Jones had built up his own faithful following. Jones was known for being smart and passionate in his preaching, and his church in Los Angeles became a popular place for celebrities, gospel singers, and other well-known people to go. He was more than just a pastor. People from all walks of life asked him to conferences, conventions, and global summits, but his rise to power was not without problems. Some people said he lived a lavish life, pointing to his expensive clothes, cars, and ties to Hollywood. Others questioned his life as a bachelor, especially after stories spread about his relationships. Those who saw them quickly noticed how different the two guys were. Jones was seen as the smart, sometimes unpredictable outlier, while Jakes was seen as the polished boss who built an empire. Their fans started to add fuel to the fire. Some said Jones was more real, while others said Jakes was the real face of modern ministry. Things that were supposed to be a good mix of different ideas and leadership turned into a story of competition. The real spark, though, came when invitations to conferences and speaking events turned into a fight. There were times when event planners had to choose between the two guys because they were both very popular. Stories started going around about how Noel Jones felt left out because he thought Jakes's fame was making his own church work less important. On the other hand, some people in Jakes's camp thought that Jones made mean theological comments during sermons that were meant to discredit Jakes's way of speaking. Some people who were there say that a meeting in the early 2000s was the turning point. But what happened behind the scenes was nothing less than explosive. Both guys were supposed to show up. People who knew what was going on say that there were heated arguments over who would be the main speaker. The stress reached a peak, and even though the full story was never told, it was clear what happened. After that, the two bishops stopped going to public events together, avoided each other at big events, and rarely mentioned each other's names in their talks. The fight wasn't just between two people, it affected everyone in the church. Groups of people started to take sides. At the time, social media was still very new, but it made the gap bigger. There were videos and stories that made one person look like the bad guy and the other person like the victim, depending on who you asked. It wasn't just a quiet competition anymore, it was a clear split that made people in the ministry world look twice. This is what most people missed. People outside the feud thought it was just about ego and competition, but people inside the feud said there were greater problems at play. Some said it had to do with ways they handled money when they had relationships with other people. Others said they thought there were personal problems that had been building for years. Some even said they were afraid of their fame or power in politics or the entertainment industry. No matter what the truth was, one thing was clear. Things that happened between T.D. Jakes and Noel Jones were at their wits' ends, but this story doesn't end with people being split up. Things that happened next would even surprise people who were very critical of them, because just as things were getting worse, a series of strange events forced the two men to face their differences head-on. The fight between Bishop T.D. Jakes, he was said to have said that his voice was just as important in the kingdom as Jake's. But because Jake had a huge media empire and a lot of money, his efforts were often downplayed or ignored. Jones was known for being smart and brave, and he never thought twice about saying what he thought. Some say he let out so much anger that even the people who were trying to calm him down were shocked. On the other hand, Jakes is said to have been upset about what he saw as pointless competition. He had put in a lot of work, sacrifice, and personal cost to build his mission. It was hard to handle the pressure of being in charge of the Potter's house, meeting public expectations, and responding to critics. For Jakes, the idea that he was putting Noel Jones down on purpose was not only not true, it hurt him a lot. He wanted to be known for more than just his power. He also wanted to be known for the mental battles and sleepless nights that came with it. Getting into a fight wasn't calm or easy. People got angry and raised their voices. Afterward, people in the room said it felt like a battle of titans, with neither side wanting to give up at first. But here's what's really interesting. What could have ended their relationship for good turned out to be the time that made it possible for them to get back together. Why? Because both men finally told the stories they had been keeping from each other for years in that honest, unfiltered conversation. Jakes found out that Jones wasn't just angry. He cared very much that Jakes' larger-than-life character didn't take away from his place in the kingdom. Jones then understood that Jakes wasn't trying to make him look less important. He was just working on a level that required attention, one that he had been pushed into by his fame around the world. The problem wasn't fixed right away, though. They didn't become best Ryans right away after that meeting. Instead, they went back to their own groups to think about what had been said and how much their fight had already hurt the church's unity. Both of them avoided each other in public for weeks and months after that, but something had changed. It was no longer so hard to get through the wall of silence. The twist that most people didn't know is this. It was this meeting that set off a chain of unexpected events in both men's lives that made them rethink everything. Not only their fight, but also their callings, their goals, and even their will. We argue, but sometimes it's the fights that make things better between two people. Also, for both T.D. Jakes and Noel Jones, those problems were going to happen faster than anyone thought. There is a point in every great story of reunion when pride gives way to weakness. That moment didn't happen in an office or on stage for Bishop T.D. Jakes and Bishop Noel Jones. It happened in their private lives, where it was quiet and often painful. Before the middle of the 2000s, both men had a lot of power that most preachers could only dream of. But success came with huge stresses, problems, and events that changed their lives in ways that neither of them could handle by themselves. Jakes did more than teach when he ran the Potter's house. It meant running a global organization with a huge team, keeping an eye on a media empire, and always having to answer to the public. People saw him as a strong leader from the pulpit, but behind closed doors, he was tired and under a lot of mental stress, which made him question his choices and look for direction. On the other hand, Noel Jones was going through his own personal problems. As the leader of a large church in Los Angeles with famous members, it was his job to take care of the spiritual and personal needs of tens of thousands of people. Ellie, health scares, family problems, and the constant pressure of what people expect of you made you feel very alone at times. People who knew him well said that he too started to think about his. He talked about how, despite his best efforts, he had sometimes felt confused and how hard it was to keep relationships going when fame and ministry took up so much of his time. Jones then spoke, and his story was just as telling. He talked about how lonely it is to be a spiritual guide, how he had to make sacrifices in his own life for the church, and how hard it was to always be compared to other people, even valued coworkers like Jake's. From the outside, what might have looked like pride or competition was actually a mirror of their shared human struggles. Both men were tired, under a lot of pressure, and carrying the weight of leadership. That was a strong, almost movie-like moment. Later, people who were there said the mood was exciting and very emotional. Years of not understanding each other had built walls between them that began to fall down. In their place were empathy and awareness of each other. For the first time, neither man saw the other as a rival. Instead, he saw them as fellow servants of a higher calling, two spiritual leaders facing similar battles under the same banner. From that point on, the process of healing moved faster. People started to talk about the past, what went wrong, and what could have been done differently. In a private setting, they were careful, deliberate, and polite in their conversations. Both men said they were wrong in some ways, asked for forgiveness when it was needed, and promised in public and private to regain trust. But even though things were getting better, the story wasn't always easy. They still had doubts, felt pressure from their audiences, and knew the media was always watching. It takes time for this amount of reconciliation to happen. Being patient, humble, and ready to accept that healing takes time are all things that are needed. The most interesting part, not only did they fix their relationship by the end of this process, but they also came out stronger. Their fight, which used to threaten to split churches and break down community trust, turned into a story about how powerful forgiveness, understanding, and a sense of shared humanity can be. It wasn't just a private matter that they got back together. The church world would soon be shocked when both bishops did something brave in public. It would show everyone, priest and parishioner alike, what real humility and unity look like. Bishop T.D. Jakes and Bishop Noel Jones finally took the brave step of making their reconciliation public after years of stress, private fights, and deep personal reflection. It wasn't just a handshake on stage or a quick picture at a meeting. It was a heartfelt recognition of how they went from being rivals to respecting each other, and it sent shockwaves through the whole ministry and gospel society. The public began to warm up for the first time at a big faith conference in Los Angeles. Both guys were given the chance to speak on the same stage, something that would have been impossible a few years ago. People in the crowd who didn't know how deep their private reconciliation went paid close attention as the two big names in ministry shared the stage. Jakes, who was very dominant, started the meeting by sincerely apologizing for any confusion that had occurred in the past. He talked about the stresses of being a leader, the dangers of being too proud, and how important it is to be humble in service. Even though he didn't name Jones right away, his message of forgiveness and togetherness kept everyone on the edge of their seats. Then Noel Jones got up on stage. He shared his own thoughts, which were similar in tone and focused on themes of humility, mutual respect, and understanding. He was known for being articulate and charismatic. When he finally talked to Jakes directly, it was a powerful moment. The audience could tell a lot from the obvious nod, the handshake, and the shared smile. Millions of people who saw the event in person or through Live